Welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis show. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. Interestingly, today we've not had any break that was really a real break. At each of the breaks, the discussions have continued right here in the studio. And Yabwabeng Asamoah just took leave of us. Of course, he, in his place, we have someone who has a lot more insights into the matter we are going to deal with right now to assist us. ACI Francis Pamdeti is the AG, or Acting Director of Corporate Affairs, the National Identification Authority. Mr. Pamdeti, thank you. You're welcome to Newsfile.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now, before we do that, the discussion they were having, okay, John, you want to share that little bit in 30 seconds about what you think could be the way forward for the GFA's running of affairs?
No, I was just sharing with him that, look, the Ghana League clubs and the various football fraternity, they can come together today and decide that they are no more parts of the current GFA structure. And that they will go and register a new company under a name like Ghana National Football Federation.
Yes.
And write to FIFA.
Yes.
And tell FIFA that, look, we constitute the bulk of the football fraternity in Ghana. These are regulations. These are our procedures. And when FIFA verifies that, they can even admit them.
And now let me agree with you and say that is what I think they should do. But what I'm adding to it is that when they register that private organization of private football clubs, they would not get an automatic right to manage the Black Stars, because that is a national team. The government can have a committee like it has now managing Black Stars, appointing a coach for Black Stars, because Black Stars is not a private local team involved in our league. It is a national team.
I disagree
so
with you.
what we are saying,
On the Black Star issue, I disagree with you.
well, you are saying they are private.
Country.
So private
Russia attempted it.
No,
FIFA refused.
So we ended up saying
China
that FIFA has to make a
FIFA
position
refused
on that.
Because FIFA says that, look, we are a federation of associations. It's not a government body. It's not like the United Nations. Okay. It's a federation of associations. So what they will normally take is the biggest, most recognized association in the country and say that you, this association in Ghana, will recognize you, constitute the team, and come and play in our officially internationally sanctioned games. So I don't think that government comes in. But well, let's leave that for.
So in effect, head or tail, this GFA,
5 member.
Yamutu.
Is Yamutu? No, the court might decide that, look, instead of liquidating it.
I'm just looking
yeah, it's possible. That's possible. Yes,
okay. And a lot of questions too have come up in respect of this GFA matter, but limited to Kwesi Nyantakyi and his future, because somebody belonging to his club management is said to have announced that Kwesi Nyantakyi is not really perturbed and that he's running his law firm in wherever, busily running his law firm, so he has no. So to be fair, too many of you have sent in the question about why is nothing happening to him by way of he being a lawyer. What I can say about that to you by way of education is that the legal profession is run by what we call the Legal Profession Act. And it says that when you have been found guilty of misconduct in a professional respect, then your name may be struck out of your roll of lawyers, meaning you have been taken away, you can't practice as a lawyer, or you can be prohibited for a period from practicing as a lawyer. So if you are found to have misconducted yourself, found guilty of an offense involving dishonesty, so I suspect that in this regard, it will be a question of found guilty. So that must happen before anything could be said about his future as far as legal practice is concerned. Thank you very much.
Well, the gentleman didn't help him in any way.
Okay.
I thought that there was no need making that statement, that he's not perturbed. I thought he should have allowed.
Okay, right.
Because
yeah, let's not discuss that. Let's not discuss that. Right. Okay. So there are fears that some 20 million citizens will be disenfranchised. Yeah, as always, we are thinking voting first, even in the National Identification Project. But why at all did the NIA exclude the voter's ID card as proof of citizenship for registration for the Ghana card? NIA sponsored the amendment that led to that, but it is Parliament that passed the 2017 exclusion amendment to the 2012 law, that is the LI. The minority NDC this week boycotted the Ghana card special or VIP exercise in Parliament. The NIA has been sued in the Supreme Court for taking out the voter's ID card. Is the $293 million project, $93 million, not Ghana cedis, project in danger after a similar exercise failed to produce ID cards? That's the question. So I start with Pambeti. Yeah. Yes. So what's happening? You want to exclude 20 million people?
No, it's a pleasure to be here. This is my first time here. It's exciting. Right. Our intention is not to exclude 20 million people. I recall that we sent our bill to Parliament last year, and in December, 4th December, the President assented to the bill and it became law. And once it was gazetted, we had that law to implement. You would notice that the requirements for registration, there's this statement that keeps going on, proof of citizenship. Proof of citizenship. That's not in the law. It says the requirement for registration and identification are the following. It says a birth certificate, a valid passport, a resident permit, a certificate of acquired citizenship, and in the case where you don't have any of these, a relative who has registered can vouch for you, or two persons who have registered can vouch for you under oath. Now, the issue about the voter ID card, I was in Parliament a few days ago when we made our presentations to them. And when the issues were raised, I just took pains to sit down. And I'm also an immigration officer.
You're right.
And one of our tools we work with is the Citizenship Act. So the issue about Article 6 has been raised. The issue about Article 42 has been raised. Now, there are clear routes to citizenship. That is one, citizenship by birth. It has its own breakdowns. Right. Citizenship by registration, citizenship by naturalization, citizenship by adoption, and where you find a kid who is in Ghana below 7 years, he's a foundling and is presumed to be a Ghanaian. Now, to prove your citizenship, you need to show something. In the case of a Ghanaian born, or one who is claiming citizenship by birth, he has two things to produce. Now, the regime before 1957 differs from the regime before 1969 and before 1979 and before 1993. Now, the one before 1957 is a bit peculiar. We subscribe to the jus sanguinis principle, that you must be a Ghanaian by blood. And Americans and some other countries believe in the jus soli principle, meaning that you must be born on the soil. So before 1957, for you to become a Ghanaian or for you to claim Ghanaian citizenship, you must have been born in Ghana. A parent or a grandparent must also have been born in Ghana. So it was about the soil. After 1957, you had quite a number of people who were living in Ghana, were excited about our independence, and felt that they wanted to be part of the Ghana story. But they were not born in Ghana. They did not fall within the category of before 1957. So you'd see the law introducing some aspects to take care of them. So you now see for the first time citizenship by registration and naturalization showing up just before 1969. And then you now have a situation where you would have either a parent, a grandparent, or a great-grandparent all in the mix. But come 1992, the law on citizenship is clear. It says that all the laws before 1992, all citizenship issues or situation before 1992 is still valid. Now, beyond 1992, it says you must, whether you are born in Ghana or outside Ghana, to a parent who is a Ghanaian or a grandparent who is or was a Ghanaian. That's the procedure of the law. Right. Now, to prove this, you need your birth certificate and that of your parent. or your grandparent to prove. So you need 2 documents to do that. With citizenship by registration, you need a document issued to you by the Ministry of Interior. And that goes to persons who are married to Ghanaians or persons who come from what we call the approved countries. The president will determine that such persons qualify for citizenship by registration. Now, for persons who do not fall within this category of registration, we would have to naturalize. And in naturalizing, one very key element in naturalization is for you to have the ability to speak a local language. So naturalization also sits on its own. You are issued with a naturalization certificate. Adoption, you are given some documentation. You can choose to go and do a passport or not, but those documentation proves that you are Ghanaian. When I looked at the law that has been passed, carefully, I also looked at the...
You spoke about all their categories, adoption, naturalization, registration. You forgot to add the foundling that you had added.
Yeah,
how do you now show that the foundling
with the foundling, the Department of Social Welfare takes care of their procedure to apply for citizenship, because then they will be under the care of the social welfare, as it were. Now, with the issue of CI-91, which talks about the procedure for registering as a voter, you will notice in the list that it talks about a passport, a driver's license, a national ID card, and a previous voter card. And then it says when you don't have any of these, you have 2 persons sign the guarantee form for you. So those are the documents that you receive.
Right.
So when I looked at 2 laws, I also looked at the proceedings in the chamber, as in the Hansard. And you would see our parliamentarians trying to prove something. They were trying to answer the question, who is a Ghanaian? And so in their report to the House, they had a heading titled Proof of Citizenship. Proof of Citizenship. But when you look at the act, like I said, it just says requirements for registration. Now, let me just say that before you are able to prove citizenship, like I've earlier, you have to show some documents. Right. Let me quickly make reference to some of the comments on the floor. Let me take that of Honorable Amakofi-Boa. He says, this amendment bill is long overdue and very critical for our country. The issue of who a Ghanaian is very critical in this century, especially because of the challenge we face. I have always said that I come from the border with La Côte d'Ivoire. On a daily basis, we know how many foreign people come into Ghana. I have seen some of them hold our own national health insurance card, and we always talk about how high the cost of insurance is. The issue is that there is not much that could be done because we have not really gone to the bottom of who the Ghanaian is. Then when you take the comments made by Honorable Odote, he says, Mr. Speaker, the inclusion of new registration documents as a requirement for this identity system is a step in the right direction. This is because, as we are all aware, under the previous law, the issue about who is a Ghanaian was always contentious. So this amendment is very good. It's a very good one. The elimination of a minimum age is also a new provision, which I very much... Then the one that struck me the most is that said by Honorable Ahmed Ibrahim. He says, Mr. Speaker, to begin with, I commend your committee for coming unanimously that the bill be passed under a certificate of agency. Mr. Speaker, if there is something as a country that Ghanaians should come together and support, I believe this bill is one of them. He goes on, Mr. Speaker, if we do not register Ghanaians and have our citizenship identification cards, to know who a Ghanaian is or not, taking national development decisions sometimes become a problem. Therefore, this House and the committee have set a good example by coming together to unanimously pass this bill under a certificate of agency. I plead with Ghanaians living everywhere to support this exercise. I must caution that the moment we bring partisanship into it, we are bound to fail. From the discussions on the floor, just for the sake of time, I've just limited it to this. You see a certain effort to use the national identity register law to define the issue or bring to the fore the issue of citizenship. Now, what are the requirements spelled out in Act 950? It says, the authority shall require an individual who applies for an entry to be made in the register to submit any of the following identity documents: a birth certificate, which, like I said, if you want to prove the citizen as a Ghanaian born, a Ghanaian by virtue of birth, it's a birth certificate you must produce. So I see it there. Then a valid passport. A valid passport because those who obtain the valid passport either use a birth certificate or a certificate of acquired citizenship. So that document, though a secondary document, is able to cover both birth and those who were issued with a certain document. Okay. This is a valid resident permit because this law covers both nationals and foreigners. And it says a valid certificate of acquired citizenship and any other information. Then it goes on to talk about the vouching for process. Now there's this argument being made around that, oh, we have 7 million birth certificates and 2 million passports. And so the passports were issued with a birth certificate anyway. But I just want to place on record that not all passports are issued with a birth certificate because we have lots of naturalized citizens in the country.
Help me out. You have done a very good job by bringing clarity and referring to this law. I'm thinking, those who are supposed to guarantee where you don't have any of these documents to show, is it unlimited? How many times are they allowed to guarantee?
The difference between this particular law and the EC law,
is that the EC law gave you only 3 times or 4?
Five.
Okay.
It gives you 5. This is unlimited.
Okay.
It doesn't restrict you.
All right.
And I think that the framers of the Act may have felt that, no, in this case, let's make it open.
Now, my next question is, before I can guarantee, I must have registered, I must have acquired my Ghana card.
Yes.
So, forgive me, but maybe a little bit beyond my village, nobody has any of these things to help them acquire the Ghana card in the first place, then to become a guarantor for another person. The most things you will find there is not a birth certificate or all the things you are mentioning. Might be, you know, a baptismal certificate, particularly for those who go to the Catholic Church around those places. So, what is going to happen to those people?
Those people are not excluded.
Okay, how?
Because let's take the entire community. They're saying that there's nobody in the community who has a document. Now, they have only a baptismal certificate. Now, in that community, there are people, maybe let's look at the law. It says the unit committee person who actually campaigned in all those communities would surely have the ID because he must qualify as one who would pass for an election in this country to be in that position. So he may have all the documentation. He knows the chief in the town.
Okay.
He went there to campaign. That person and one other person can vouch for the chief. The chief, once he has his card, can go ahead and vouch for the rest. But you see, this vouching for process is not a novelty.
Which section of the law?
Wait, just...
No, it says... No, I'm not saying that the unit committee...
No, I wanted to refer to the law.
When you challenge a person, that person has to send the documents to the chief in his village.
Okay.
And then the unit committee member or assembly member in his community. It's just to help with identification.
I understand that the NIA says that even where you have any of these documents, birth certificate or a passport, often we talk about birth certificate and passport, but you have given us the others.
Yes.
It's not only birth certificate and a passport, but
certificate of acquired citizenship.
Certificate of acquired citizenship, and then there's the
resident permit.
Resident permit. So four documents. Even where you have this, it is not a given that you will be registered. You go through interviews. Yes. You'll be probed a bit.
Yes.
Because these are not foolproof.
Yes.
So the voter's ID that you have a problem with, why don't I take that one too and go through a similar question process?
This question actually has to be answered by our parliamentarians, but let me try and respond to it. By my practice, I know what secondary documents are and what primary documents are.
Right.
Voter ID card doesn't fall within the category of primary documents. You would notice that Act 950 is focusing on primary documents. The only secondary document it considers is a passport because those who have acquired citizenship either via naturalization or can procure a passport and may not have a birth certificate. And birth certificate, that's why it's allowed.
Okay.
But when you look at the voter ID card column, they are all secondary documents. and you don't need a secondary document to feed a primary document. The national ID card, seriously, is trying to serve as the primary document that all of us would use in transacting. Because when you look at the LI that deals with the mandatory use of the card, LI 2111, it says if you need a passport, you must show the national ID. If you need a driver's license, you must. So if you look at our license, there's a portion for national ID, but it's incomplete because the national ID was not available. If you need to transact a business in the bank, you need a national ID. Land transactions, voter ID card, voter registration, you need the national ID. So there are mandatory uses of the card. And so the essence of the card being a primary document that must feed others is something I think the parliamentarians wanted to preserve. And that is why they may have taken out the voter ID card.
Thank you. Now, I'll come to John. I understand that, you know, a major leg of your argument as a minority in Parliament is that we know we have been to court over, you know, a certain process, and the Supreme Court pronounced that the NHIA card is what should be taken out, and it was taken out of the voter ID registration process. And then the court subsequently, upon a second application to the court, said that, okay, we have a way of sanitizing the system. So give the Electoral Commission the opportunity to purge the problems with, you know, those who have entered the voter register wrongly. All of that has been done. So your concern now is that since the Supreme Court didn't say, you know, take out voter ID card, and people have used that anyway, why should that be left out? Is that not so?
You say something. First of all, I don't want to get too much even into the politics. We have a nation to govern. We want to ensure that we register Ghanaians. That's the bottom line. The law is made for man and not the opposite. I can give you a number of laws that we've passed in Parliament which have been struck down or overturned by the Supreme Court. I can give you a number of laws that we've passed in Parliament which upon second thought brought back and amended portions of it. And so I think that we should have picked that portion out. And I admit that all of us in Parliament, we should have picked that portion out. But I want to look forward. I don't want to be caught down by who seconded this, who made a comment, and all the comments they made were legitimate comments. We want to register Ghanaians. That's the most important thing. You ask a critical question. You go to my village, Yala. I can tell you on authority, nobody in that village has a passport or a birth certificate. You know it. You are from the north. It's a fact.
No, you are from there. You have a passport.
Look. They are listening.
They are from the village.
No, I'm not from. I'm from Bupe.
You say it's your village.
I'm saying in my constituency.
Sorry.
Look, we want practical issues. In statistics, we don't engage in double counting. And so when we make an assumption that you cannot just say because there are 2 million passports, 2 million birth sets, you lump them together and come to 9 million, to be statistically incorrect. That's the first thing. And you ask that question. So you go to my village. Nobody has these two documents. How do you go about it? And I've just looked at the law, Section 8 of 750, when you amend it. It clearly tells you who can register. This issue of unit committee and all that has to do with challenges. But the law is explicit that to register, you ought to acquire A, B, C, D in order to register. So it's when you have registered, then you can begin to vouch for others who do not have it. So the first question is, how do we get people registered in Yala for them to begin to vouch for other people in order to register? Look, elections and all that, let's put that aside. That's not the primary issue. I mean, we want to register Ghanaians. Let's deal with that first.
You see, what is the difficulty in giving opportunity to create an identity system based on primary documentation sources?
I'm coming there.
Because we know we've already had problems with this voter thing.
I'm coming there. I'm coming there.
So why do we... I understand that trying to get 1 or 2 people in an entire community to now be guarantors, some may even decide to abuse that. they may say, bring money before I guarantee for you.
This is a serious matter. This is a serious look. He agrees that passport is a secondary document. Passport is not a primary document. However, he says that because probably you require a birth cert, he is certain about that.
Or a certificate
So,
of citizenship.
what we are asking is that, can you come with a primary document which satisfies that you are truly a Ghanaian? That's analogy. I'm just making a
even the
deduction.
passports, we have found to be problems.
Oh,
we have had situations where people who are not Ghanaians have applied.
Not even the birth certificate, the primary source itself.
Right.
Birth certificate. Something you know it. But I'm saying that let's even put that aside. Let's deal with
Please
the
note the
passports.
concerns. I will come to you.
Look,
You'll answer some of
passport is
them.
a secondary document. We are saying that because probably you came with a birth cert. Forget about the fact that we know other nationals have our passports. We can use a passport. I'm saying that what is so wrong with using the national voters card? What is so wrong with that? That look, you cannot use the national voters card just as you use the passport.
Okay, can you tell me this first? Why are we thinking about voting?
No, it's not voting. I'm
We're
talking
thinking
about
about
the card.
identifying the citizens.
No.
Why are we thinking about voting?
Then you're not good. I'm not even talking about voting.
No,
I'm
the
saying
NDC
that
is saying potentially 20 million people will be disenfranchised.
no, that's not my argument.
That is a voting
No,
interest.
that's not my argument. Because you can't even have 20 million people voting. This NHIA program is going to register infants, people below 18 years and all that. So I don't want to go into elections.
So
When we
disenfranchised
get
may be
into
used here as being denied the opportunity to get the
Rather,
card.
let's ensure that we do not prevent Ghanaians from being registered.
Okay.
Let's answer that question first. Once we answer that question, we can begin to look at elections, NHIA and all that.
Why didn't this issue engage you in Parliament so much? Because what you did was an amendment of the 2012
Yes.
law. And it came to amend a previous situation that allowed the
That
voter
allowed
ID.
that.
So why didn't you pay attention and
so
deal
the
with
first
it?
question is that
Why are you waking up to this?
no,
suddenly?
why did we allow that? You rightly said that previously it allowed this. Why have we decided that we won't allow that? Number two, it came under a certificate of agency. Certificate of agency, normally it is right through. And so I think that, one, we shouldn't have taken this through certificate of agency.
You're blaming certificate
Number
of agency
two,
for not doing your
we
job.
should have recognized this, and I considered that right from the intro. But more importantly, must we allow that to prevent us from doing what is right? If we can take steps to correct that, let's look forward.
Okay, thank
Why
you.
do we want to be bogged down by events of the past?
Okay.
And I think that we should move this thing away from the NDC MPP issue.
Okay.
We want to register about 30 million Ghanaians.
All right.
What is the most effective, appropriate, and efficient way of getting every Ghanaian registered without being... I don't want to use the disenfranchised.
Thank you.
I don't want to get to politics.
So Kofi, I just Googled up two articles I wrote, one about citizenship and one about dual nationality.
I read one of your articles.
And the one about dual citizenship, for example, Professor Sivigyo went to the Supreme Court 2012. And the Supreme Court seemed to have suggested that to even demand someone to show documents of proof of their citizenship and make it mandatory to their enjoying their rights as citizens is wrong.
There's that
Wow.
suggestion.
Wow.
Professor Kofi Kumado said in the lecture that in Ghana, if you are a natural citizen born here, it's more difficult to prove it than somebody who comes from outside and gains citizenship. And we've still not dealt with it. This is an attempt to deal with it. Now, there are things that we call in Imani a national elite consensus. Our leaders must agree that there are things we have to do. First point, it's very sad that even for this thing, which should become the first thing we can get a national elite consensus on, it's been reduced to NDC, MPP, and voting. You are suggesting we shouldn't do that, but you are doing it. And
What do you mean by that?
I'm saying that this issue has been reduced to an argument which
You mean
is
I did that here?
No, I'm saying you are suggesting we shouldn't do that as a country.
Yes.
But I'm saying that the politicians have moved into that
So when you say
section.
you are using a generic.
Yes,
Okay,
that's what I
thank
mean.
you. That's all he wants
now.
to say.
And I'm
So-
saying
so
that
let's
because
allow him
some,
to talk.
please, don't say. I'm saying that because
not fair.
I want to send the message that this thing is important to us. Please, let's try and agree on it. That is number one. Number two, I have a problem with the NIA too. There is a saying that perfect is the enemy of very good. I think the NIA is trying to do something perfectly right from day one. And you will never get there. Like he said, we need to register 30 million Ghanaians and get them going and doing things, all right? Now, there is a point on each side. For instance, to say, we cannot use the voters' ID card because a lot of them were not properly acquired. Agreed.
Farijan admitted to the fact that
yes,
the register is bloated by how much?
Yes.
8 million or so?
Yes.
Or 80,000 or
We've
so,
had
something like
fights
that.
over that.
And how is the passport also bloated?
So I'm coming there, please. I'm saying there are points on either side. Okay, passports in this country are also acquired fraudulently. Okay, the Gitmo 3, we give them travel certificates or travel documents or whatever it is. Should they get, national ID? But let us agree that, look, the birth certificate is originally by law that source document which we should have and use for this process. I'm building my point. I met a politician outside who said that many politicians think that the right thing is too difficult to do. And that what he does is to ask himself what is the most difficult thing to do. And if it turns out to be the right thing, he will do it. And I think this brought that to my mind. Why? Because why is it so difficult to say that, and NIA has been there for a number of years, to say that for the next 1 year, everybody go and acquire a birth certificate?
Fine.
I'm asking. I'm saying so. Why is it so difficult to say so? One. And two, make sure that the births and deaths registry or whoever is up and doing only 10 regions in this country. Okay? Why don't we give ourselves a year? Say, everybody go and get that.
Good.
One. And when you get there, then they'll ask you to bring 1 or 2 people, whatever, but get it. And in the meantime, whilst all the people are doing that, we will start with the Ghanaians who have their documents. Why is that so difficult? All right? So that we get through this thing. Now, when we've registered, let's say 30% of the people who have all their documents or whatever it is, we can now come and focus on the rest who don't have it and deal with this issue. But here's the point. Whatever it is, personally, I believe that even if we get to the point where people are talking about not having birth certificate or whatever, and we will use the voter's ID card, at least a voter's ID card that has been used at least in one election, register them and give them the Ghana card and give them a year to validate. Over the year.
Kofi, we are talking about a source that has brought us problem which we know. And now we are by law excluding it so that we can start on a clean slate. You're saying we should still go and take that virus along?
I'm saying that paradigm is flawed because, one, we are seeking perfection and we won't get it. Number two, we have a very serious...
We must start it.
No, hold on. I'm saying we must start something. We must get it right. We need to know that it will not be perfect from scratch. But we have to do the intellectual heavy lifting to figure out a way to clean this thing going forward. It can be right once and that's it. So I'm saying instead of holding everybody back and creating this unnecessary furore, we have people in Ghana today who have all the documents they need. Start with them. That's one. Number two, the thing that we are all dodging and we behave as if it's too difficult, which is everybody get a birth certificate. It's not that difficult.
But use that process to get a
NIA
card.
So I'm making my point. So put the births and deaths registry in place and put proper people there. If they don't work, fire them. There'll be people who can do the work. Give people a year to get their birth certificates. In that year, register the people who have it. Now, when we are done with that year, and now those people who have now gotten proper birth certificates come, we register them. And I'm saying the last level, people who maybe don't get it, which I don't think should be impossible, I say if they have a voter's ID, which at least has been used once, what it means that they have elected the president of this country. Let them register and give them the Ghana card with a caveat that over the next year, they will get their birth certificate and validate the card. If we use just this process, we will get rid of all this unnecessary acrimony.
Interesting.
And then we'll get this thing done for Ghana's sake.
Okay, Kwaku, so how do you diagnose what is going on and what should we do going forward? Because it does look like, if we are not careful, the suit filed in the Supreme Court might stall this again. We have been at this for since when? I mean, after 60 years, if we can't clearly determine how we identify ourselves, that's a shame, isn't it?
Sure. But our members of parliament, particularly the minority side, they were sleeping. Were they sleeping?
You said it was taken through a certificate of urgency.
I nearly said nonsense.
So CS73, they were sleeping.
I nearly said nonsense. You're seeking refuge in the realm of certificate of emergency urgency to excuse your ineptitude and incompetence. The answer is clear. See, the certificate of urgency is part and parcel of legislative rules and regulations. It's in their standing orders. The committee, it was referred to a committee. Is it the legal constitutional committee? That committee is made up of the two sides of parliament. The committee members, in spite of the urgency, sat down, deliberated on the things, and unanimously agreed on what was before them. The report was not more than 20 pages. It might be far, far less. This is not like some loans, the loans that we put together.
It's an amendment of a portion of an existing law.
Thank you. Thank you. And it was brought to the plenary for them to deal with. And we all have the copies of the Hansard. Not a dissenting voice or vote. Okay? And you come back and tell us all these things. It was there, black and white, that they were deleting voter ID cards, driver's licenses and things. Black and white. So certificate of urgency blinded them or intoxicated them, got them to sleep. It's inexcusable. Look, it's a serious business. We are paying them as members of parliament. You are representing constituents across the country. So you can't come back and tell me that, oh, it was certificate of urgency. An inexcusable point to put out there. To be honest, you see, look, we've been at this thing from 2006 to 2018, 12 years. Are we that incapable, inherently incapable as a nation to get this thing going? I think that we should not excuse the minority at all. They're going to Supreme Court, fine, that's rule of law. I'll be the last person to stop it. They could have gone back to Parliament, of course, but I'm sure they were looking at the numbers and the mood and think that they can't go back for...
Some say it will be very difficult for the NIA to defend what is before the Supreme Court.
Why?
Let the Supreme Court rule.
On the basis of Article 42 of the Constitution, every citizen of Ghana of 18 years of age or above and of sound mind has the right to vote and is entitled to be registered as a voter for the purpose of public elections and referenda.
And is there any attempt to prevent anybody from voting in the next election?
That's what they are demonstrating.
No, I can't see the linkage.
Because the
I'm unable
card
to see.
is a multifaceted, is for...
No, are we going to use the card?
Yeah, they're
various
integrating
purposes.
it.
No,
They're
no, but wait,
integrating it.
no, wait.
No.
We have to be...
They're integrating it.
Are we using the card to vote?
No.
No.
So where is the question coming from?
No, you're
I
not
don't
getting
get
our
it.
point.
Okay,
No.
clear
Okay.
that for us.
Let me
Clear that for us, because we understand.
No, you don't. I'll
Yeah, but
explain
that's
to you.
not the idea
But
now.
Yeah,
we
no,
understand that part of the purpose of this card is to do what the Supreme Court commanded in the Abu Ramadan case. When they ended that judgment, Georgina Wood was clear and said the time for a national identification system that is multi-purpose and incorporates all that we require in an ID card rather than holding several ID cards was now. And that is what we are responding to. So if we need another card for something else...
No,
then
that ruling came after, 2006 when the act was passed. So the existence of NIA preceded that ruling. So the institution has a mandate to execute. But it's true that some countries along the West African sub-region use their national ID cards to vote. But in Ghana's law, there hasn't been any suggestion, especially in our NIA law, that the essence of this card is to enable us vote. There are mandatory uses of the card, and it says that for purposes of transaction that requires identification, the Ghana card must be presented. So it is true that when you want the services of a passport, and you have to identify yourself. The law is saying that don't present a driver's license. Don't present, because driver's license pertains to those who can drive. Don't present a voter ID card because it excludes those below 18. Don't present, what do you call it, some other document. What you should present is the national ID and must be uniform. Everybody has the national ID. Yeah. When he goes, he covers everybody. Now, for purposes of voters, like he said, the law on requirements for registration as a voter says the following documents must help identify you. Not to prove that you are a citizen, but to help identify you. So it stands to reason that the national document that says that for purposes of identification show this falls there. And I'm not surprised that CI 91 lists the national ID as one of the documents to prove your identity.
You are saying that what we are doing
yes.
Is partly not to respond to this urgent call that has been giving for a long time. And I'm just reading that concluding statement in the Abu Ramadan case I referred to, led by the CJ Georgina Wood. They said, the need for a credible and reliable multi-purpose national identification system comprising the relevant data and communication infrastructure that would answer to most of our national needs, whether for electoral planning or developmental or other purposes, is greater than ever before. We think the time has come for the appropriate authorities to respond to this need. You are saying
no, so
you are not responding comprehensively.
If you look at
meanwhile, it's going to cost us how much?
2.4 billion over 15 years.
No, they have disputed that.
15 years. No, they haven't.
The statement by Georgina
over 15 years.
Let's pay attention. And in which context did she make the statement? It was about an election matter.
Right.
But she goes to say that it's not just about election, it's about national development.
Right.
And when you look at the mandate of NIA, it says that the issuance of card is for purposes of economic, social, and political advancement and development of this country.
So eventually we'll use it.
When we do the national ID,
right,
it is us serving that mandate imposed on us by the people of this country.
Something, a quick one. It's important that we say this. I was one of the persons who made the presentation leading to this whole thing. I think in 2007 or so, it was Imani DI at Alisa Hotel. And my presentation was about how to combine all these cards and everything, you know, so I don't want to go there. But I want to say that part of what this is supposed to do is to give you something which you can hold and say, it makes me a Ghanaian.
Absolutely.
It raises, hold on, let me finish.
Everything.
It raises what a lawyer will call a presumption, although it's rebuttable, that you are a Ghanaian. In short, what it means is, if you have that national ID card, somebody has to now come and prove that you are not a Ghanaian. Otherwise, it says you are. And we are saying, and in that presentation, one of the points we made was that you can have one card that can replace voter ID, national health insurance, driver's license, SNIT, and all those things. And it made sense. Now, we came up against the law, the EC law, which says the EC is the only institution that should give voters ID card. And we made the point that that was because of the exigency at the time. But that amendment can be made so that we can use this. My point is, we should not defeat this process by saying that it is not intended to do this. It is intended to take care of 8 different cards. That's where we should go. The point is, who qualifies? Who qualifies
even with
a birth certificate?
Even with voting, eventually, we'll get to a point where if you want to register as a voter, the only source document will be this card.
Or your parents.
So it follows. But I will just plead with the NIA.
He's being careful to allow you to put the political aspects.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying not to do.
You realize that because what they are really doing is to give us an identification.
Very good.
Which any entity can now determine that this is what we are going to use to vote.
I would
they don't
with
want to be
NIA.
the ones
I would
to tell
deal
you
with
that.
them.
See,
I would deal with the
I will
NIA.
sit here and listen to my good friend John talk as if what he says represents only his position. We hear his friends and colleagues out there talking.
It's the same on the other side. If you want to get into that, we won't make any progress. That's not the issue here.
You see,
others have said that because you brought Togolese. Hold on. I don't want to get into that. I don't want to get into that.
Even the questions I canvassed to you when you were boycotting, Ilusa Fuseni granted an interview and then stated these matters. But when I canvassed them to you, you were like, look, that's not.
Yes, and I'm saying this.
I have an advice for the NIA. I have an advice for the NIA.
Honest.
I would plead with them to get off the political discussion.
Tell your colleagues first.
I'll plead with them to get out of the political discussion. They have the mandate to ensure that they pull all of us together.
He's here. He says
See,
they are
in
not
the
even getting
Hansard,
there.
in
You
the
are trying to
Hansard,
force it on
recommend
them.
the president.
Ahmed said,
Oh.
cut out partisanship.
Comrade.
If you bring in partisanship, we will fail.
Comrade.
In the Hansard, when
We
they were
just
dealing with
finished
this.
Ramadan. Comrade, can I make my point? We just finished.
Okay.
There's no injunction.
Thank you.
There's no injunction on my
Thank you.
part.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I wish that the president himself,
Uh-huh.
at this point in time,
I'm coming. You
would
do so.
step back and invite all the stakeholders.
Okay. Thank you.
Let us deliberate on
They
this
should
matter.
invite the stakeholders once more.
Let's
once
build
more.
consensus as
Okay.
it stands.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
We
you.
don't have
Let's hear
consensus
Pam
on this
Betty.
matter.
He's noted a few points. We want him to help us clarify. Yeah.
Now, I also just want to say quickly that the authority doesn't seek to engage in the politics. We want to stick with the mandate.
Okay.
The mandate as it is now is what we're executing.
Okay.
We are not trying to be perfect. We're just trying to follow the law. Because in this country, if you don't follow the law, you'll be taken on. That's what we're trying to do. Not trying to
But
be
there's a
perfect.
real difficulty that is mentioned to you. Will you find a way of getting that on board,
Would
which
that-
will require that you
but
may
that
have to
won't
go and
come from
amend
them.
your
No, but it's
law?
not for us.
It won't come
Not for
from
us
them.
to do. But we talked about passports being in the hands of foreigners, birth certificates being, even in America. I mean, people who do not deserve to have the pass have it. So it is not. We don't have to blame. We don't have to blame.
Sorry, sir, don't interject.
We
Sorry.
don't have to blame these documents as faulty documents. It's the human beings that make it faulty. But once the law says that you must have a birth certificate and a passport, let's do so. And make sure that persons who do not qualify to have them should not have them. The next issue is
Let's do so.
birth and death registry should function. That's not within our mandate. We have been given a mandate to execute. It would be perfect if birth and death is effective and working very well and can support us. But as it stands now, we are way, way, way at the back. When you talk about national identity, Togo, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, as I'm an immigration officer, we struggle to enforce the law because you can't identify anybody. When you meet somebody, you think this person is a foreigner, will you say he's a foreigner because of his accent or the way he looks? No, you need an objective way of assessing that. You need a card. So as a country, we are lagging behind. But fortunately, with this new arrangement, I believe that it's about time. If we miss this opportunity, we would listen as a country. We will struggle.
Okay.
But let us
requirements
support
for registration.
like you said. This project doesn't seek to exclude anybody.
Okay.
The voter ID card, electoral laws of this country. Now let me use your same example. How did they come by the voter ID card when the voter ID card law says you must produce X documents to get it? And if you don't have these documents, you must have guarantee. How did they come by the voter's ID card in the very first place? So that thing doesn't really hold. There's a way
Court
out.
has settled that.
There's a way out for people
On the voter's
to
ID.
get legitimate documents, not necessarily because they present the documents listed. Now the other issue is
Went to sleep and
Benson was saying that we need to do it in segments. Now, it's important to know that the law says that we must create a national identity register in an electronic form. That register has to be populated before you do continuous registration. So, in populating the register, you must do a mass registration exercise. So, what we are doing is to populate the register with lots of people. And that's the mass registration phase we are now.
Okay.
After we've done with that, continuous registration will go on.
Okay.
So I believe that those who would have people vouch for them, after the registration, they can still go for their birth certificates and update their records.
So the opportunity still
It's still
exists.
there.
That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a break. And
A break?
Yes, we take our final break, and when we return, our very final topic to discuss. So thank you very much for coming. I wish we can have you for an hour
Yes.
and just deal with the basics and the ingredients
Yes.
into all these processes and how it goes, right?
agree.
Thank you very much, Pam Detty. We'll be right back. Pam Detty gets to stay with us, and then we will finish up with this issue. I had already given the very final topic. We will not be able to deal with that. But very interestingly, the latest Odikro report says that only 3 MPs have a perfect record of attendance to work. 54 of them have not been to work 15, 20, and 27 or even 29 times in the first session of this 7th Parliament. And they did that without permission, contrary to Article 97(1)(c) of the Constitution. and which gives also the leaders, particularly the speaker, the power to initiate the processes that will lead to they being losing their seats. So that's interesting. We may find time some other time to look at that. Now, let me share with you some of your messages and come to Palm Dirty to continue with us on this matter. Now, Martin Luther Laboni says that the minority's reasons for opposing the National ID project is frivolous. That's what you meant to write, and without merit. Were they not part of Parliament when it did the amendment process of the law, and why didn't they raise such issues, even if it had merit? Eja Adams says the NDC is not fighting for Ghanaians; they are fighting for their ghost voters and foreign voters who don't have relatives in Ghana to identify them as Ghanaians. Really? Ni Anan Esuman in London says, tell John Jinapo to tell his constituents who don't have birth certificates to get one, period.
He's in London, that's why.
Yeah.
He lives in London. That's why he can send that.
Right.
It's not impossible.
It's okay.
It is not impossible.
It's okay. Yeah.
If he was in Central Gonja, he won't send that
Kofi,
message.
you know what? It's true. It's not impossible. But some of us can relate to some of the things he
We
says,
all can relate to
because it will take you a stretch of a travel
We all can relate.
to get to town and to get to a birth and death, a center to do.
Something, an important point on this.
Right.
52% of Ghanaians today live in urban areas. We think it's difficult, but it's not as difficult.
Okay.
If we give ourselves a year, there are people, about 30% of us have it.
Pamdeti
So let's
asked the
start with
question,
those people.
how did we, those of us who don't have all the primary documents for the voter's ID,
Get all
how
the
did you
secondary
manage to get
documents?
onto the voter's
No,
ID?
because the
Let's do
requirements
it.
were different.
Okay.
The requirements were different. Let's do it.
Akwesie Champong in Maryland says that, I want to know from Palmdeti why hospital and school records cannot be used as secondary evidence of Ghanaian citizenship.
Triangulation. When you do it now, you can use that to check.
Okay, so maybe you can start from there. Yeah.
Let me just respond to that.
But that's belated. The law is already
Some
in.
of the
So
the interview,
the
the registration officers have some questions they put to somebody who's come to register to help them determine whether truly they deserve to be registered.
okay.
Some of these questions come up, but we also have to know that you could have somebody. We have Ghanaians living in Nigeria, for instance, who work, they have children born in Nigeria. They'll have the accent, they'll have the mannerisms.
And the registration will go abroad as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, such persons, if they appear before you, your first reaction will be, oh, this is a foreigner, just because of the accent. But when you begin to ask the relevant questions, you know that, oh, okay, it's because he lived in this place for this long. So there are questions our people will ask, which I can put out there, that will be asking you A, B, C, D for, the crooks to prepare before they come. But the point is making it relevant. They are very
I thought that would have
questions
been part of the education instead.
No, to tell them that they should come and tell us the truth
Okay.
of their circumstance and
Okay.
not to give them what we'll be asking them.
Okay. Benjamin says, I commend government for putting together a solid team to oversee and revive the passion of the nation. Indeed, there is hope for the future. All right. Okay. So there's an issue the minority have also raised about the cost involved.
Let me react to that quickly.
Yes.
Now, the issue about cost. I was in Parliament and Honorable Attafuah was leading the charge with regards to how this was a scam, it is over bloated, it is fake and all that. I was quite shocked. I was taken aback. Reason being that on Sunday, a press statement was issued by the Honorable Minority Leader, Hanoi Drisu. And in that statement, I was not in Parliament to hear the discussion, but in that statement, he said they had granted the NIA a tax waiver to a whopping $176 million. And I was asking myself, so what was the basis for giving a tax waiver if you hadn't scrutinized the figures? Now, you are saying that the government component is $124 million US. The private partners component is $169 million. Even those sums are less than the tax waiver. But you see,
That's 293
let me finish the point.
a year.
Yes, for a year.
Right.
Let me finish the point. Now, the committees of Parliament do very serious work These committees are put together.
You have to wrap up in a minute.
Based on their
It's
expertise.
important we deal
No,
with this.
we're out of time.
No, but that
Now
won't be
the
fair.
issue is that
You can't
if
make this statement and allow it
if
to
the
go.
contract has come before them, they see the figures and find the figures good enough to give a tax waiver. For me, I'm taken aback. I can't really tell how you say something is
Okay.
not
In Parliament.
necessary.
Yes.
Words like scam and those things are not even allowed on the floor. And that's why I said the NIA should move away from the politics of it. Tax waivers are not granted just based on contracts. I am a parliamentarian. Government can decide that it is bringing equipment. When you are bringing the equipment, you must pay. Government can say that, look, for this and this purposes, we want a tax waiver. We granted those waivers, and those amounts are correct. If you care to know, go and check. That contract you are talking of, you haven't brought it to Parliament. Number two, we did the cash projections.
But whilst he's talking,
Please,
you can
please,
open
this
to
is an important matter.
section 3E of
This
your,
is an important matter.
of the amendment.
And I want the NIA to concentrate
Yeah.
on their job.
Yeah.
Mr. Attafuah appeared before us. He talked about the initial cost of the 200 and something million.
Okay.
And we asked for the projections, the cash flows over the 15-year period. If you add the tax waiver, the cost is 1.4 billion. It doesn't mean the state would go into the consolidated fund, take 1.4 billion and pay.
We have run
When you
out
do
of
a
time.
projection
We have
of
run
cash
out of
flows,
time. This is what
what are we
I
talking
want to
about?
bring to your attention.
Please,
Has the
please.
NDC minority paid attention to Section 3E of this Act? Section 3E, when it gives you the birth certificate, valid passport, valid residence permit, valid certificate of acquired citizenship, then E says any other information as may be required by the authority. Now, any other information, will that not include, can I not use my voter's ID as any other information?
You know, I mentioned the primary documents that establish citizenship. You notice that adoption is not there. But adoption is a very critical component of citizenship.
Right.
That could fall under that. But whether voter's ID card, which is a secondary document, will fall there, I don't know.
You don't know.
I can't tell.
So the NIA doesn't know that what we are all talking about,
There's a room for them to operate.
there's room for it.
No, what I'm saying is that I'm not a person to interpret these laws.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the text of the law.
All right.
And I'm looking at a certain pattern.
Already is before the court,
Yes.
and not any other court but the Supreme.
We'll wait
Get this
for
thing
the
going.
court.
Supreme
The court
Court.
kills the mission. We all move on.
Right.
But they shouldn't be sleeping on their job.
Okay, thank you, Kuku.
Tell your friend to
my guests
invite
have
us
been-
and let's deal with
my
this
guests
matter.
have been.
Tell
my
your
guests
friend,
have
the president, to get involved and let's deal with this matter.
Francis Palmdetti, who is the acting director of Corporate Affairs National Identification Authority. John Abdullahi Jinapo is MP, member of Finance, Mines and Energy Committees of Parliament. Kofi Bento is a lawyer and vice president of Imani Africa. Abdul Malik Kwekubako is editor-in-chief of the New Crusading Guide newspaper. We had earlier also hosted Yao Boabeng Asamoah, who is ranking member, Subsidiary Legislation Committee of Parliament. I'm Samson Ladi Ayenini. As always, my outfit is by Latida. Have a good afternoon. God willing, next Saturday, we come your way with another edition of Newsfile, your most authority.